My next patron question is from Joey, who wants to know my preference between two popular television animation eras. Which of these two types of shows do you think is better? The early Disney animated TV shows, The Wuzzles to Darkwing Duck, or the Warner Brothers animated shows produced by Steven Spielberg, Tiny Toons, Animaniacs, etc.? I have a massive fondness for both of these, as they hold many childhood memories and they have successfully held up years later. Between these two, I have to say the Spielberg cartoons win out for me. This isn't too surprising, seeing as Animaniacs is my personal favorite animated series of all time. That series displays such an incredible wit and cleverness and so many layers to the comedy, and that describes several of the other Amblin animated series from the 90s. A huge amount of credit goes to the talented writers like Tom Ruegger, Paul Rugg, Sherry Stoner, Deanna Oliver, Peter Hastings, and several others. Spielberg was an integral part too, as he did not merely put his name above the title. He read every script and looked at every character and gave suggestions. The songs were brilliant, mixing both classic and original tunes with inventive lyrics. As I said, Animaniacs was my favorite, primarily because of the antics of the Warner siblings, who more than successfully carried on that Looney Tunes style of humor. Its spin-off show, Pinky and the Brain, was also a smart series that wonderfully tackled social commentary with these two mice. Tiny Toon Adventures was a great take on the next generation of Looney Tunes, and was a strong starting off point for Spielberg producing these animated television shows. I talked about Freakazoid not too long ago, and how that proved ahead of its time with the internet-savvy humor and wacky superhero. Admittedly, Pinky, Elmira, and the Brain was an odd experiment that did not entirely work out. Oh, it had its moments here and there, but the pairing of those characters seemed to constrain Pinky and the Brain rather than provide a fresh new avenue. I'm greatly enjoying the recent Animaniacs revival, though, which feels right at home with the original series with its use of topical humor, delightful songs, and wacky shenanigans. The early Disney afternoon shows have their special charm and quality to them too. They were mainly focused on adventures, using either classic Disney characters or new ones. Of that early crop Joey mentioned, Darkwing Duck is probably my favorite. It was an inventive take on comic book superheroes, with Darkwing battling against a lot of creative villains. His relationships with Launchpad and Gosling were nicely written too. DuckTales and Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers also successfully mixed adventure with humor. On the cuddlier side, we have the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. This isn't actually a Disney afternoon show, but I still count it among that era, and later on it actually became part of the One Saturday Morning block. It was just a nice, pleasant way to finish off that block and end the morning on a good note. It had an understanding of what makes Winnie the Pooh and Friends so appealing, and the writers came up with so many charming stories for them. Tailspin was an interesting one, putting Jungle Book characters into a new setting. Making Baloo into a bush pilot managed to work really well though, and like the other adventure series I mentioned, found creative uses for these characters and their high-flying escapades. I did watch The Wuzzles and The Adventures of the Gummy Bears back in the day, and remember enjoying them, but I admittedly have not revisited them in a long time. Even though Joey cut off the era at Darkwing Duck, I do want to include Goof Troop. Watching some episodes on Disney Plus not too long ago, I found it was even funnier than I remember, largely thanks to the contrast between Goofy and Pete. The idea of making it into a domestic sitcom with two wacky neighbors with polar personalities was very inspired, and produced plenty of funny moments. Since I mentioned the Animaniacs revival earlier, I should mention the new DuckTales show, which I also thought was wonderful. I love the way it incorporated these Disney television characters, and in addition to creating engaging and funny stories, felt almost like a love letter to that period in television animation. I mostly focused on the writing, but the Disney television animation series and the Amblin animated series of that era were also beautifully drawn and animated, standing as some of the best-looking television cartoons during the 80s and 90s. And do I even need to mention the theme songs, which remain in my head to this day? Anyway, do you prefer the Disney afternoon shows or the Amblin animated shows produced by Warner Brothers? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for your question, Joey.